relationship with Jeremy over the years.
Yeah.
Has worked on a variety of different projects and has contributed very much as a consequence of the veteran community. So thank you, Jim, for setting this up. Okay, Jeremy, come on down.
All right.
All right, so it's my pleasure today to introduce, I think, who is a truly outstanding, and I have to emphasize, young man. Okay. We have Jeremy Hubbard here, who's an anchor on Fox 31 here in Denver. Has been there for several years, has roamed the country before he came back to his home state.
Yep.
He was born in Glenwood Springs,
yep.
and now he's back here. And over the last several years, he has produced a number of documentaries at his own initiative at Fox 31 and elsewhere, I might assume. I'm familiar with two. One was called Finding Norman, where Jeremy cataloged the biography of one of the gentlemen we found and identified as part of our honors burial program. And then there's a second one, which is just recently an hour-long presentation where Jeremy accompanied a group of Vietnam veterans over to Vietnam, just recounted their experience, went to a bunch of different venues over there, and really, I've seen it, and it's an outstanding product. And so we truly have a friend in the news media business with Jeremy. It's a pleasure to have him here today, a real honor. And so Jeremy's going to give you an overview of his dedication to veterans of all wars, Vietnam War, Korean War, Iraq Wars, all the others. And so without further ado, I'll introduce Jeremy Hubbard for your pleasure today.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for having me today. It's so great to be with you. I have notes here. I usually have a teleprompter, so you'll have to excuse me for consulting my notes. I also usually have makeup, and I look taller on TV, so pardon the disappointment. Apologies for that. It's great to be with you. As they mentioned, I've known about this group for a little while now. I did a story with Jim Topkoff a few years back about the honors burial program, and my socks were knocked off. I had no idea that all over the metro, and really all over the country, if we dig down deeper, there are these cremated remains of unclaimed veterans just sitting on the shelves of local mortuaries, and they sit there for decades. And so we did a story with Jim a few years back, and Bill reached out a few months back and said, hey, we're doing a big one. Do you want to do a bigger story on it? And so we did, and the result was this special that we talked about a minute ago called Finding Norman Mergler. It aired last year, and it was focused on this one man, Norman Mergler, who'd been on the shelf of a mortuary for about 50 years. His own daughter didn't know it. She thought his remains had been spread down by Pueblo decades ago. And so we were able to tie it all up together and put together a really nice story about the work that you guys do. And it was great. And so we just got some good news about that, actually. We found out that that story has been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. And we'll find out next month whether it won. So it's pretty cool. If it wins, I'll bring the Emmy Award here, and you can all take a picture with it and hold it. So I was asked to talk about a couple of specific things today, just about the stories we do, why we do them, and how we go about finding good veteran stories. As they mentioned, for about a decade or so, I've been doing stories focused on veterans at Fox 31. It's a passion project for me. I've been honored to go all over the world, been to about 80 countries, a lot of war zones. I was just in Ukraine last year, been to Russia, been to Afghanistan, was just in Vietnam. And so I just love people who sign up on the dotted line to do something bigger than themselves. I think it's the ultimate sacrifice. It's something I didn't do and wish I had done, and I'll get into more of that in a moment. But I'm moved by everyone in this room and every family member who sacrificed because of what you guys did for your country. And so anytime we get the chance to share a story about something like that, I jump at it. So, Bill asked me some specific questions that we should answer, and one of them was, how do we go about assembling a story about veterans? And it's a good question. You see stories on the news, and you wonder, well, how did that get on the news? And there's some secrets to a good TV news story, because we're visual. And so we like good visuals, we like interesting characters, we like emotion and moments, the stuff that's going to make you remember what you see on TV. There's so much clutter out there and 24-hour news on all the time. So my goal is to come up with a story that makes you remember it the next day or the week later or something like that. And with veteran stories, that's pretty easy, because you guys are all pretty memorable characters. You've done great things. You tend to have good emotion, or surrounded by people who are proud of you and honor you and get emotional when talking about it. And so when it comes to veteran stories, they always make great TV. And so I was thinking about a good example of that, and we had one last year We'd done a story on this woman named Marie West. She was about 100 years old, lived down in Fountain, Colorado, and she served during World War II in the Navy Waves. She was one of about 300,000 women who donned the uniform in World War II. A lot of people don't know that, but 300,000 women signed up and served their country during World War II. She was one of them. And it's pretty amazing, I think. You know, women don't get enough credit for what they did during that war, really any more sense probably. And so we did a story on her. Her one regret about World War II was that she never got to leave the country. She wanted to go serve in Europe or be on the battlefield, and they didn't let women do that back then. And so I got to thinking about it, and I have this friend that runs this veterans organization where we take veterans back to the battlefields where they serve. We've been to Normandy and Pearl Harbor and a bunch of places like that. They have this partnership with Cunard Cruise Line. They have the Queen Mary 2. It's the only cruise ship that crosses the Atlantic, basically follows the same path of the Titanic. And so every year we cross the Atlantic on the Queen Mary 2, and every day in the ship's theater we have these programs where I interview veterans about their service. And so I thought, this might be the way to get Marie to Europe finally. 80 years after World War II, maybe we can finally get her to the battlefield. And so we were able to arrange it, and she went with us on the Queen Mary 2, and this was the result of that. This is Marie West's big adventure. You ready, Marie?
Oh. There's no way 101-year-old Marie West could have been ready for what was about to happen to her back in May and June of this year.
Let's get out of here.
Shoved off aboard the Queen Mary 2 ocean liner from New York City, bound for Europe. She spent the next 2 weeks marking history as the 80th anniversary of D-Day approached.
Oh, it's amazing.
Alongside some of the very history makers who were there.
Well, you know, I feel good about it.
It all started when she was asked to take part in a program sponsored by the Greatest Generations Foundation, a veterans charity started in Denver.
I mean, our family is just astounded at the whole thing.
They were assembling a team of veterans to return to the battlefields of Normandy, France for this milestone anniversary.
Yes, I was excited about it.
And they wanted Marie because she was one of the 350,000 women who donned the uniform during World War II.
I was helping. Of course, I went to boot camp and learned about the Navy. Of course, did a lot of marching.
Part of the Navy Waves, or Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, she was enlisted back when women weren't allowed to do much of anything in the military.
Even though she was in the Navy, she never got to climb aboard a ship, never got to experience Europe like so many men in World War II did. That is, until now.
Now it was time for Marie to inspire the rest of the world. And that's just what she did aboard the Queen Mary 2, crossing the Atlantic for an entire week.
I couldn't go overseas, so you'd better do what you can to help. And how I appreciate all of this.
Where she shared her story with history-loving travelers on stage with a group of women who served their country too during Vietnam.
The best day about going to Vietnam was coming home.
It's because of Marie's trailblazing volunteerism that these nurses were able to wear the uniform during Vietnam, where they served as nurses. And it really wasn't until she came on this journey, took this stage, that Marie realized the importance of her role in history, the trails she blazed.
Marie right there.
Suddenly, she was thrust into the spotlight, even signing autographs.
Marie West, WW2, at the very bottom there.
And the adoration didn't end when the ocean liner came ashore in Southampton, England.
I'll lend you my gloves if you like.
She met dignitaries, boarded a ferry,
Unbelievable.
crossed the English Channel to France, just as the heroes of D-Day did 80 years ago. And then something happened that she never could have imagined in her wildest dreams. She was there at the cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach on the D-Day anniversary, meeting the President of the United States and the First Lady. For a quiet farm girl who never sought attention, fame, or glory, this was the ultimate recognition.
I cannot believe that that opportunity is available to her at this stage in her life.
A voyage of a lifetime.
Back home a few weeks later here in Colorado,
What a thing to have toward the end of your life.
her church gathered for a slideshow with pictures from her adventure,
Unbelievable that I was up in that thing.
so they could experience what it was like to be in Marie's shoes.
This trip helped some of that confidence come back
Ask her daughters, they've always known she was a hero.
because we are so proud of her. And she doesn't understand what kind of a person she is.
But finally, the rest of the world knows now too. In Denver, I'm Jeremy Hubbard.
So that's Marie West. So the fun part of my job, as you know, from watching the news, not everything that we get to talk about on the news is a pleasant experience, and most often it's not. But when I get these little distraction stories where I can do something that's memorable and really pay tribute to somebody who deserves it, then that's the best day of my week, and I love doing it. So that gives you a sense of what makes a good TV news story. Good emotion, good moments, and the other thing I said was good characters. We're always looking for good characters because that makes great TV. If you give me somebody I'm going to remember, then I'm really going to talk about that story for days and weeks on end after the fact. And so we met somebody like that up in northern Colorado a few years back. I couldn't believe it when I heard about it. I heard there's this 96-year-old guy who's riding around northern Colorado on a Harley Davidson. And I was like, okay, we got to go meet that guy. And here he is.
The story of a World War II veteran from northern Colorado who's 96 years old and it appears was born to be wild. You'll see him riding all around Greeley, wind in his face, leather vest on his back, looking every bit a biker, unless you ask to see his ID. That's when you realize hidden under that helmet is the face of a seasoned rider who proves Wanderlust isn't bound by birthdays.
And a lot of them don't believe me.
Much to the dismay of his children.
Well, they think I should have quit riding a long time ago, too old for it.
Glenn Norris is still riding motorcycles at 96 years old with no plan to stop.
As long as I can get on it, I'm not too old.
Dangerous? Perhaps a little, but to this biker, danger's no stranger. His thrill ride started nearly 8 decades ago, not on the streets of northern Colorado, but on the high seas of the Pacific, thousands of miles from home, on board this ship in World War II.
We hauled 2,000 Marines into Iwo Jima and Okinawa.
In some of the heaviest fighting in the Pacific, on board the USS Lubbock, this sailor survived kamikaze attacks.
They were suicide, coming diving on you all the time.
Watched his shipmates die.
We had burials at sea with 2 or 3 guys.
And fought his way island to island, all the way up until August 1945, when he was on hand in Tokyo Bay to actually witness the end of the war.
Right, yeah, when they signed the surrender, I watched them sign. It won't be long, we'll be going home.
Before he even went off to war, he'd already purchased his first bike.
Indian motorcycle, 1939.
When he returned to Greeley, he started saving for the next one.
It took about a year before I was able to get a 45, used 45 Harley.
That was about 15 motorcycles ago. For 79 years, this has been his favorite mode of transportation.
Every day, practically.
Though it's getting harder to find people his age to ride with. Thankfully, his granddaughter's always up for an adventure.
She enjoys it a lot, and her husband don't like it, but...
Glenn doesn't get out on the open road quite like he used to.
I don't get too far out of town much anymore.
And these days, a lot of his rides have a purpose. A few weeks ago, he once again escorted more than 100 veterans to DIA en route to Washington as part of an honor flight. When will he stop riding a motorcycle?
When I can't get on it.
For centuries now, people have wondered, how do you live for a century? Who knew motorcycles might be the answer? But Glenn swears this is what keeps him so young. This and one other ingredient, too.
Cayenne pepper.
Spicing up your life.
Well, here's the way I buy it.
Whether it's in the kitchen.
Sprinkle it on my eggs, and I go to Golden Trail to eat. I take it with me, sprinkle it on whatever I got.
Or on the open road. It's what keeps Glenn Norris going for nearly 100 years. And stop signs are the only things that will slow him down.
You can't quit and sit down. A lot of people, when they retire, that's what happens. They sit down, start watching TV, and first thing you know, they can't hardly move.
There you go, that's Glenn Norris. So the bummer about doing stories, especially in World War II veterans, is that you lose them before you'd like to. Thankfully, you've captured their story before it's too late. Glenn died about 6 or 8 months ago up in Greeley, but it was great to get to learn about him and see him on that motorcycle before he did. And who knew the secret was cayenne pepper? So I'm running to Costco after this and buying a big vat of that stuff. Somebody asked me, why the interest in veteran stories? Why have I done them for a decade plus? And to be honest with you, there's a one-word answer. It's guilt. I did not serve our country. Both my grandfathers did. My father did Vietnam era, but didn't go to Vietnam. And I didn't. You know, I was just, distracted at that age and laser focused on my career and thought, okay, who needs that? And in hindsight, if I had it to do again, I certainly would have signed the dotted line. So I think as penance for that, I've spent the last decade trying to make up for it by doing stories about the real heroes who actually did serve. And so guilt is the reason. The other part is sort of the legacy of my grandparents and my dad who served too. When I was young, my grandpa died when I was a teenager. And like most young, dumb people, I didn't take the time to ask him much about his service. I wasn't curious enough to want to know about how he served, where he served, any of that. I didn't have any of the answers. And like most World War II veterans, he didn't go around talking about it. It was just something I never knew about. And thankfully, I was able to learn a little bit about it a little later on when we were doing a story about these great American cemeteries around the world. You may not know, we all know about the cemetery in Normandy above Omaha Beach where there's 6,000 American soldiers laid to rest. But the truth is there's 26 of those cemeteries all around the world, in Europe and Asia and Africa, where American citizens are buried on foreign soil near where they fell on the battlefield. They're run by the American Battle Monuments Commission. And we've been to a bunch of them. There's one in Manila, Philippines. There's a bunch in Europe and Africa. We've been to one in Tunisia. And so we were doing a story on those. And we went to the one in Florence, Italy. And there's about 300 guys from the 10th Mountain Division who were buried there. Of course, they fought in the mountains of Italy, and many of them died right there. My grandpa was in the 10th Mountain Division too. And while we were researching this, I was actually able to learn a little bit more about my grandfather. So this gives me some answers about why I love doing this and how I can pay tribute to my own relatives. So here's my grandpa's story, briefly.
Their legacy is also forever preserved deep in the storage rooms of the Denver Public Library, home to thousands of artifacts permanently housed in the 10th Mountain Division Resource Center. They have a database on every man who served in the 10th, including, it turns out, my own grandfather.
Charles Gardner was assigned to Company B.
My grandpa, Chuck Gardner of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, that's him right in the middle there, was just 21 years old when he went to Italy to serve with the 10th Mountain Division. I never knew this until now, but 10th Mountain archivist Kelly Schmidt tells me one day in April 1945, while driving his commanding officer through an area covered by heavy sniper, mortar, and artillery fire, my grandfather was wounded by the shock of an enemy explosion.
And even though he was severely injured, he refused to go to get checked out by the medics. He kept doing what he needed to do to help his commanding officer until finally his CO looked at him and said, "This is a direct order. Go get checked out."
That sounds about right. I was lucky. My grandpa made it home from Italy, home from World War II, and lived a long life as a rancher on the Western Slope. He died in 1998 at the age of 75.
So yeah, I was able to learn about my own family and their service. So that punctuates why I love doing these stories. And man, if I could go back, and I would encourage the young people in the room to really absorb as much of this as you can while this history is still around us, because it's going to be gone before you know it. And we're surrounded by heroes, especially in a setting like this. So it's our obligation to learn about the rest of you. And that's why I love doing these stories, is because we can help people do that. Another question that I had here was, Bill asked me to help understand what are the ingredients or what it's like, what's the feeling like when you know that you have a great story. We talked about the work that you guys do with the Honors Burial Program. When I set out to do that story, initially I was just going to do this broad story about all these cremated remains that had finally been identified thanks to the hard work of you guys, and were finally going to be interred at Fort Logan where they needed to be. But when we were shooting that story, we were at DU, and we were in this classroom, and Bill was giving a presentation to these students who were going to go do some research on the veterans. And he mentioned this name, Norman Mergler. And he said, "We don't have any answers on this guy, Norman Mergler. We know that his wife is buried out at Fort Logan, but he's not. And we've heard about a relative, but we can't find where she is, and we just didn't have any answers." And right then, this light bulb went off, and I was like, that's the veteran I've got to focus on. Because if you can sort of drill down on one story you can help tell a bigger story. And I thought, I can tell the bigger story of what you guys are doing through Norman Mergler's lens. So that's why we went about that. So really, that's how you go about finding a good story, is drill down, find a very specific thing, and then tell that story. And you'll help sort of people understand the rest of it. But the feeling of getting a good story, there's nothing like it. And somebody mentioned we went to Vietnam a few months back. We were doing a bunch of stories on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, which of course is this year. And also the 50th anniversary of Operation Baby Lift, which was this Herculean effort to get 3,000 orphan children out of Vietnam in the final days of the war. So I was in Vietnam for about a week a few months back. I don't know if any of you been back to Vietnam? Has anybody ever been back in here? I know it's a very personal experience, and if you're not up for it, by all means don't. But we went with a bunch of veterans who had a life-changing experience when they were there, and it was just really powerful to get to witness that and share that with our viewers. And so to answer the question, what's it like, that feeling when you know you've got a great story? There's nothing like it because you know that it's going to be impactful. And I knew that the minute we sat down in Vietnam with this guy named Jan Pittman. He had one goal in Vietnam. He wanted to meet the enemy, and he actually got his wish.
I'm glad I came. I've been wanting to do this for over 50 years, so.
Army veteran Jan Pittman left Vietnam after his tour of duty in 1969, never imagining he'd be back.
I was a artillery officer, basically a forward observer.
Seeing the electric miniguns and the tanks that were part of everyday life in a war zone. But there's still one thing he'd really like to see.
I'd actually like to meet some VC, maybe a VC commander.
Hard to fathom wishing for a face-to-face meeting with the enemy the first time he was here, when he was just barely an adult.
I turned 21 over here. I was commissioned, I was 20 years old. They needed officers.
Jan escaped death twice during his tour in Vietnam.
Running over a landmine was not fun.
The first time, when his vehicle ran over a landmine.
You know, now they call them IEDs. It was a 155 round, which was about 96 pounds of metal and high explosive that it probably was a dud, had two wires coming out of it. As I hit it, I hit the round first, and chance of about 10 billion to 1 that not going off. So pretty lucky.
The second time, he was on a helicopter when the engine failed.
Yeah, we went down hard, just west of Zilin.
The war didn't kill him, but it has continued to take its toll in the years since. Jan struggles with the lasting impacts of Agent Orange exposure.
I've got diabetes. They say that's part of it. I got neuropathy in both legs. I haven't felt my legs from the knees down in 20 years.
Returning to the place that changed everything about his life decades ago has brought with it every possible sentiment.
It's been fun. It's been kind of emotional at times. Excuse me.
That was then.
But seeing all of this again,
right there, bingo.
It is everything he could wish for. And we do mean everything.
We are in Tay Ninh. This young lady was designated the #1 sniper in the Viet Cong. And I think she was 16 years old.
On this night at dinner, that wish to get face-to-face with the enemy finally came true.
We've had different feelings about coming to this restaurant, you know, but hey, the war's over, so it's all good.
Yes. Yes, we are friends.
Yeah.
When you get happy.
Yes.
One more time. 1, 2.
I never thought I'd be getting a hug from a VC lieutenant. Ever. We both did our jobs. That's all.
That really surprised me that I'd actually sit down with somebody who, was our enemy.
It's over. Get over it. They did what they thought was right. We did what we thought was right.
So that was Jan Pittman's wish come true. As you can imagine, a lot of veterans do not like going to that restaurant and want no part of anything like that. But for Jan, it was very impactful, and it was the chance to sort of bring everything full circle. So that's what it's like to sort of capture that moment on camera and share it with our viewers. And so I love telling stories about veterans. It's just such an honor to share stories like yours. And I want to thank you because I know in the 50 years since, not a lot of people have, for your service, especially for your service in Vietnam. And it's just an honor to speak with you all today. Does anybody have any questions? I'm happy to answer it if you got any. My birthday? It's in August of '72, so I was born during Vietnam, yeah. The museum in Vietnam?
Was that Saigon?
Yeah, that's in Saigon. They call it the War Remnants Museum. They've actually changed it a little bit. I was there 10 years ago, and it was very anti-American. It's changed a little bit, and it doesn't quite have the same anti-American tilt. You can see that there's a ton of relics from the war, tanks and helicopters and stuff that were left behind. And they're all sort of on the front lawn there in Saigon. And one of the cool things I got to do was, there's that famous photo from the last day before Saigon fell, of the folks climbing that ladder to get on the rooftop, to get on a helicopter, to get out of there. And it's actually this apartment building in downtown Saigon. It was the CIA headquarters. And now there's a bar up there at the top. And so I got to climb to the rooftop and check it out. So that was kind of interesting. But Vietnam's fascinating because it is communist, no doubt about it. But it's this weird mix of communism and capitalism. It's not Fidel Castro's communist at all. Yes, they're communists, but they love money, and they love Americans, and they love business, and the economy's thriving. The craziest thing about going there is trying to get around and not get run over by a scooter, because there's 7 million scooters in Saigon alone. And somehow they navigate without hitting each other. It's the wildest thing in the world, but it's fascinating. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir.
Jeremy, I've met you many times.
Yeah.
You may not have served in the military, but you're serving your country now.
Thank you.
In an awesome way. And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for what you do.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you guys for what you do. No doubt.